The call came in at 5 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon in August, while I was sitting at the end of my dock with a thermos of coffee and watching an osprey circle the far side of the bay. My son-in-law said, "We're coming up Friday. There'll be about 12 of us. Get the guest beds made up, grab some steaks from the butcher in Bracebridge, and make sure the boat's gassed and ready. We'll be there by dinner." He did not ask. He did not say hello. He issued instructions the way a manager does to someone he does not respect, and then he laughed at something one of his friends said in the background, and the line went quiet. I sat there for a long moment watching the osprey fold its wings and drop. My name is Desmond Creef. I am 67 years old. If you saw me at the general store in Port Carling, you would see a man in a faded flannel shirt and rubber boots, picking up a liter of milk and a copy of the Globe. You would think, retired schoolteacher maybe. A grandfather who spends his summers fixing the dock and arguing with the squirrels. You would not think anything more than that. That is exactly the impression I have spent 40 years cultivating. What my son-in-law, what Travis does not know, and has never bothered to find out, is that before I retired to the lake I spent 32 years as a senior forensic investigator with the Canada Revenue Agency, and later as a private consultant for 3 of the largest Bay Street firms in the country. I did not chase small cheats. I dismantled schemes worth tens of millions of dollars. I was the man they brought in when someone very clever thought they had hidden something very well, and I was the man who proved them wrong, every time. I set my thermos down, 12 people, a full long weekend I assumed, stretching into the week. I had exactly 40 minutes before Travis would expect a call back confirming his invitation. I did not call back, instead I dialed Quentin Marsh. Quentin picked up on the second ring. He had been my colleague at CRA for 19 years before he left for private practice, and he was the kind of lawyer who did not need to raise his voice to make a Crown prosecutor flinch. "What is it, Des?" he said. "My son-in-law is coming to the cottage with a dozen people," I said, "Friday." There was a pause. "Does he know what the property cost?" "He knows enough," I said. "He knows it's on the water and that my daughter told him the address. He doesn't know what it's filed under." "You want the agreement?" "Full version," I said. "Send it to the printer up here, and Quentin, I'll need you Thursday." I heard him already typing. "Give me 90 minutes on the document." I hung up and walked back up the path to the cottage. The property was called Ridgecroft. 4 bedrooms, 2 boathouses, a screened porch that looked northwest across the bay, and a dock that stretched 20 meters over the clearest water in Muskoka. I had purchased it 14 months ago through a numbered company, 111 Forsim 329 Ontario Inc., specifically because I wanted my name off the public registry. I made the mistake of telling my daughter the address when she asked to visit in June. She came alone for a quiet weekend and she was good company. We cooked lake trout and played cribbage and did not discuss her husband once. Then last week she told him. I did not blame her for that. My daughter is not a cruel person. She is a woman who has spent 7 years trying to hold a marriage together with a man who treats generosity as evidence of weakness. She told him because she still believed, somewhere under all of it, that sharing beautiful things with people you love is a reasonable thing to do. She forgot that Travis does not share, he acquires. I had 40 minutes. I went to the cellar and carried up 3 cases of the good wine, 2 Okanagan Reds I'd been saving, a case of Ontario ice wine, and the bottle of 30-year Glenfarclas I opened only for people who understood what they were drinking. I moved all of it into the locked utility room behind the mechanical, the one with the steel core door and the deadbolt I'd installed myself. In their place, I put 2 boxes of $6 table wine from the discount rack at the LCBO in Huntsville and a handle of generic vodka. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. I put my laptop, my personal documents, my camera collection, and the carved soapstone piece I'd bought in Iqaluit 40 years ago into a waterproof duffel. I engaged the smart lock on the bedroom door. Code only, no override from outside. I went to the printer. Quentin's document was already waiting, warm from the machine. It was 12 pages long. The header read Guest Access and Liability Indemnification, Temporary Commercial Use Agreement. To the eye of a man who has never read a contract in his life, it looked like an insurance waiver. Boat launch liability. Trip and fall at the dock. The sort of form you sign at a canoe rental and never think about again. The body of the agreement told a different story. Clause 3.2. Occupancy of the premises by more than 4 individuals constitutes commercial use under Ontario Regulation 290/12 and triggers the commercial rental rate as specified in Schedule A. The rate was listed as $9,000 per night, standard market rate for a Muskoka waterfront property of this classification during peak season. I had 3 comparable listings to back it up. Clause 6.1. Unregistered guests, defined as any individual not listed by full name on the access manifest, incurred a penalty of $3,000 per person per night. Clause 8.4. The signatory waived all residential tenant protections under the Residential Tenancies Act and agreed that any breach of the commercial terms entitled the landlord to immediate removal without notice, with full outstanding charges due upon demand. I placed the document on the entry table next to a ballpoint pen. I set my duffel bag and my fly rod case by the door. Then I sat on the porch and watched the lake go gold in the evening light and waited. I heard them before I saw them. Bass from a car stereo, then gravel in the lane, then 4 SUVs, 2 Yukons, a Navigator, and a Range Rover with a rental sticker half peeled from the bumper, pulling into the clearing like they owned it. My son-in-law stepped out of the lead vehicle, wearing a golf shirt with the collar up and sunglasses that probably cost more than my outboard motor. He was 35 years old, a condominium developer who had never built anything that did not leak, and he moved through the world with the absolute confidence of a man who has never once been held accountable for a consequence. He saw me on the porch and spread his arms wide. "There he is, Des, buddy. Come help with the coolers." He was already unloading. "The boys need a drink. Where's the doc?" I walked down the steps. I did not help with the coolers. I looked at the group, 11 of them, not 12. Men in golf shirts and women in expensive athleisure, all of them already holding drinks, all of them looking at the property the way people look at something they intend to use up. "Where is your wife?" I asked. My son-in-law waved a hand toward the last vehicle. "She's not feeling great, car sick or something. She'll be fine." He was already moving toward the porch. "Come on, Day. Keys, Wi-Fi password. Let's go." I walked past him to the last Yukon. My daughter was in the back seat with her eyes closed and her hands folded in her lap. When she heard the door open, she looked up. "Dad," she said. Her voice was thin. "I'm so sorry. He said it was a client appreciation weekend. He said you'd already agreed. I didn't find out until we were an hour up the 400. I squeezed her hand. "Come inside," I said. "Go to the kitchen, make yourself tea." She nodded. I walked back to the front door. My son-in-law was already trying the handle. "House policy," I said. My voice was not loud. It had the same quality it had in 23 years of depositions, quiet enough that people had to stop talking to hear it. "Everyone signs in. Liability insurance requires it. If anyone slips on the dock, I need documentation." My son-in-law laughed. He made a show of it for his friends. "Insurance? You're kidding me, right?" But he picked up the pen. He didn't read a single word. He scrawled his signature across the bottom of page 12 and tossed the pen back on the table like he was finishing a bar tab. "Happy? Now get us some ice." I checked the signature. Date, time, GPS stamp embedded in the form's digital watermark. Quentin had built in a secondary capture through the document's encoded metadata. It was valid in any Ontario court. I picked up my duffel bag and my fly rod. My son-in-law looked at me. "Where are you going?" "Fishing," I said. "What? Who's going to? There's no one here to." "The keys are in the door," I said. "I am not the caretaker, I'm the owner." I walked to my truck. It took me 3 minutes to maneuver around the rented SUVs parked diagonally across my entire clearing. As I drove down the lane and turned onto the highway, I looked in the mirror. My son-in-law was standing on the porch holding a bottle of cheap vodka, watching me go. He looked like a man who had just walked into a room and couldn't find the light switch. I drove 12 kilometers south to the inn at Lake of Bays where Quentin had booked me a room under the company name. Good Wi-Fi, a window facing north, nothing but water and tree line and sky. I opened my laptop. Ridgecroft had 8 cameras installed through the summer. Living room, kitchen, main deck, both docks, the lane, and the boathouse. Nothing in the bedrooms or bathrooms. I am a private man, not a voyeur. Everywhere else is my property, and I watch it the way a landlord is entitled to watch a commercial tenant. The screen divided into 8 feeds. They had already started on the cheap wine. One of my son-in-law's associates, a man with the kind of tan you can only get from not working, was opening bottles with a multi-tool and pouring them into my good crystal glasses 2 at a time. Another had figured out the sound system. The outdoor speakers on the main deck were running at a volume that would have the neighbors on Marchmont Bay making noise complaints by 10 o'clock. My son-in-law was in the kitchen, opening drawers, looking for something. "There's got to be better booze," he was saying. "Old man's too cheap to put the real stuff out where we'd find it. Check the pantry. Check the cellar." I watched them try the cellar door. It was the steel core one. They pulled at it. One of them kicked it twice. The door did not scratch. I opened a new spreadsheet and typed the first entry. Then my son-in-law, standing at the kitchen island with a glass of $6 Merlot, said something that stopped my fingers on the keyboard. He was talking to the man with the tan, keeping his voice low, as if he thought the microphones wouldn't reach. Once we get the property transferred, he said, we can list it in the spring. Muskoka waterfront, 4 bedrooms, 2 boathouses. We're talking $3 million minimum, maybe $3.5 if we time the market right. The man with the tan asked something I couldn't hear clearly. Power of attorney, my son-in-law said. Once he's been assessed and we've got the paperwork in place, we don't need his signature for anything. He tapped his temple. The man is losing it. You should see him at family dinners. Goes blank mid-sentence. My wife agrees with me. He drank. We already looked at places for him. There's a facility in Parry Sound. Not bad, but he won't know the difference. I sat in my room at the inn and listened to my son-in-law explain how he was going to have me declared incompetent, transfer my power of attorney, sell my property, and place me in a care home, all while drinking wine in my kitchen. The anger when it came was not hot. It came in cold, the way the lake comes in February when you're not expecting it. It started somewhere at the base of my ribs and spread outward until my hands were very still and my thinking was very clear. I thought about 3 years ago, a Tuesday morning. My son-in-law had called me not on his regular number but from my daughter's phone, which meant he knew I wouldn't answer if I saw his name. He was crying before I finished saying hello. He had invested $60,000, money he did not have, into a pre-construction project in Barrie that had collapsed. The developer had walked, the deposit was gone. He owed money to 2 private lenders who were, in his words, not the banking type. He had not told my daughter. He begged me not to tell her either, just this once. He would pay me back, he swore it. I was quiet for a long time. Then I wired him $60,000 from my personal account because I thought about my daughter. Because I thought about what it would mean for her if her husband's situation got any worse. Because I thought that people sometimes make terrible decisions under pressure and learn from them. 3 weeks later, at a family barbecue in Oakville, I heard my son-in-law at the grill telling my daughter's cousins about his investing philosophy. Real estate is all about knowing when to hold, he was saying. Everyone else panicked on that Barrie project. I got out at the right moment. Made 60 grand clear, he snapped his fingers. Diamond hands, right? My daughter looked at him with something close to admiration. I stood by the picnic table and ate my potato salad and said absolutely nothing. I had given him the chance to be better. He had used it to practice being worse. I opened my email and typed a message to Quentin, document secured, I wrote. Proceed with phase 2. His reply came back in 4 minutes. A single line, I'll be there by 10 tomorrow morning. Quentin had spent Wednesday researching the dress codes and protocols for a municipal noise and occupancy compliance officer for the township of Muskoka Lakes. He had a laminated badge on a lanyard. He had a clipboard. He had the patience and the bearing of a man who has been annoying powerful people professionally for 30 years. I watched on the dock camera as his rental sedan came down the lane at 10:04 the next morning. He knocked twice, then twice more. My son-in-law answered the door in board shorts, squinting. Someone behind him in the room was asking if they were out of coffee. Good morning, Quentin said. His voice had taken on a particular nasal quality that municipal employees perfect over decades of thankless work. I'm following up on several complaints regarding this property. Noise ordinance violations after 11 p.m., occupancy concerns related to the commercial classification in the county registry, and an unregistered short-term rental operation. My son-in-law put his hand on the doorframe. This is a private cottage. According to the county land registry, Quentin said, consulting his clipboard, this property is currently held under 117329 Ontario Inc., which constitutes commercial ownership under Township Bylaw 2019-42. Given the number of vehicles and the occupancy level, we have an obligation to verify compliance with the fire code and maximum guest thresholds for commercial waterfront properties. My son-in-law stepped outside. He had about 4 inches of height on Quentin, and he used all of them. I don't know who called you, but this is my family's property. My father-in-law owns it. He invited us. Sir, the deed is registered to a numbered company. It's the same thing, it's his company. He lives here, we're guests of the owner. The owner, Quentin said, is a corporate entity that has filed a seasonal commercial designation with the county. That changes the inspection requirements. May I come in? You may not. My son-in-law stepped forward. You can take your clipboard and your little forms and go back to whatever office you came from. I know people on Township Council. I'm going to have your position reviewed before the end of the week. Quentin didn't flinch. He made a note on the clipboard. Obstructing a bylaw inspection carries a fine of $1,500 per incident under provincial regulation, he said. I'll note the refusal and leave you with this. He tore a pink carbon form from the pad and set it on the porch railing. Have a pleasant morning. He turned and walked to his car. My son-in-law grabbed the form, looked at it, crumpled it, and threw it toward the tree line. "Do you know who owns this property?" he shouted at the retreating sedan. "Do you have any idea how much money that man has? He'll buy your entire department." He went back inside and slammed the door. I watched from my in-room and thought, there it is. He has been using my name as a weapon for years. He just used it to threaten a man he thought was a nobody. I called Quentin. "Did you get everything?" "Body cam running the whole time," he said. "The obstruction, the threat, all of it. Des, we have what we need." "File the complaint," I said. "And then, Quentin, I need to speak with my daughter." That evening I sent her a text, 3 sentences. "I know what he's planning. Meet me at the Esso in Bala. Come alone or don't come." I watched on the kitchen camera as she read it. I watched her look at my son-in-law, who was out on the main deck with his back to the cottage door. I watched her stand up very quietly and pick up her keys from the hook by the entrance. She walked out the front door and did not look back. I was parked at the Esso when she pulled in 10 minutes later. She sat in the driver's seat with both hands on the steering wheel and said nothing for a moment. Then, "He's planning to have you declared incompetent, isn't he?" It was not a question. "Yes," I said. She pressed her lips together. "I've heard him on the phone." I didn't let myself understand what I was hearing. She looked at the dashboard. "He told me you'd been forgetting things, that you'd left the boat unmoored twice this spring, that you'd called him by the wrong name at Christmas." "None of that happened," I said. "I know," her voice was very quiet. "I need you to hear something," I said. I played her the audio from the kitchen camera, 37 seconds. My son-in-law's voice, low and certain, explaining the plan. When it was finished, she didn't cry. She sat very still, the way people sit when something they already knew becomes something they can no longer avoid knowing. "The facility in Parry Sound," she said. "He took me to see it in May. He said it was for a friend's father." She exhaled slowly. It smelled like disinfectant and old carpet. "You have 2 choices," I told her. I was not going to soften it. She needed the sharpness of it to cut through the years of being managed and redirected, and told what she was seeing wasn't what she was seeing. "You go back to that cottage tonight, and tomorrow you are a witness to everything that happens there. Or you come with me now, you call a family lawyer in the morning, and you let me finish this." She was quiet for a long time. Out at the pump, a minivan was filling up. A kid was chasing a dog across the parking lot in the dark. "What does finishing it look like?" she asked. "It looks like you being free," I said. "And it looks like your husband facing every consequence he has been avoiding for 7 years. She reached into the back seat and unzipped a bag she had apparently packed before she had even read my text. "Then let's go," she said. I drove back to the inn. My daughter took the second room Quentin had arranged. She turned off her phone, ate half a sandwich from room service, and was asleep by 9 o'clock. She slept for 11 hours without interruption. I do not think she had slept that well in years. The next morning, while she sat on the inn's small porch drinking tea and watching a heron work the shallows, I sat at the desk in my room and made 3 phone calls. The first was to my corporate lawyer, who handled the filings for 1147329 Ontario Inc. He transferred formal control of all decisions regarding Ridgecroft to a separate holding entity, 2289441 Ontario Inc., for the consideration of $1. The transaction was registered electronically with the province by noon. My son-in-law was no longer standing in his father-in-law's cottage. He was standing in an unauthorized commercial trespass on a corporate property he had never heard of. The second call was to Quentin. "File the complaint with the OPP," I said, "not as a domestic dispute, as a corporate break-in with significant asset damage. I'll send you the damage log." The log was by then 22 line items. The dock boards pried up while someone looked for a hidden key box. The cedar strip canoe with a gouge along the gunwale from a boat shoe. 3 crystal glasses from a set that had been a retirement gift, irreplaceable, found broken in the recycling bin. A sleeping bag burned through by a bonfire left unattended on the stone fire pit. The outdoor speakers run at full volume for 40 hours straight in the kind of August humidity that gets into every connection and joint. Total documented damage, $34,800 and climbing. Quentin read the list and said, "This is felony territory, de." "I know," I said, "make the call." The third call was to the family lawyer my daughter had quietly retained 3 months earlier, on the advice of her sister. I had not known that. She had been planning longer than I had. Some part of me was not surprised. I opened my laptop and watched as the OPP cruisers turned down my lane at 2:30 in the afternoon. 2 marked units and an unmarked pickup. No lights, no sirens. They moved with the quiet purpose people who were not expecting to negotiate. My son-in-law came out onto the porch when he heard the gravel. He saw the uniforms, he straightened up. He used the voice he uses when he believes confidence is the same as authority. "Officers, I think there's been a mix-up. This is a private property. My father-in-law is the owner, Desmond Creef. If you give me 2 minutes, I can call him and clear this up." The lead officer, a constable with 20 years on her face, stepped forward. She had a folder in her hand. "Mr. Travis Haverstock," she said. He blinked at his own name. "This property," the constable said, "is registered to 2289441 Ontario Inc., a corporate entity. We have a complaint filed by the company's legal representative regarding unauthorized commercial occupation, willful damage to assets, and failure to comply with a valid commercial lease agreement." She held up the folder. "This agreement, signed by you on the date of entry, constitutes a commercial tenancy contract. You are in default of that contract and you are on corporate property without authorization." My son-in-law went through several phases in about 4 seconds: confusion, dismissal, the beginning of anger. Then something behind his eyes flickered and went out. "That was a liability waiver," he said. "I signed a liability waiver." "Sir, you signed a commercial tenancy agreement, page 12, line 4. Your signature, date stamped and GPS verified." "I didn't read it." "Ignorance of a contract's terms is not a defense in Ontario," the constable said. She had the flat patience of someone who has explained this before. "You have been in breach of this agreement since day 1 of occupancy. You are being asked to vacate the property immediately. Failure to do so will result in arrest on charges of criminal trespass and mischief over $5,000. My son-in-law looked back at the cottage, at the people inside, most of whom were already edging toward the kitchen windows to watch. "I want to call my father-in-law," he said. "He'll sort this out." "You're welcome to make that call," the constable said. He pulled out his phone. He dialed. I let it ring through to voicemail. He stood on my porch and listened to my outgoing message, my voice calm and slightly bored, and then heard the beep. He didn't leave a message. What came next happened quickly, the way collapses do when the structure was never sound to begin with. One of my son-in-law's associates, the man with the tan, walked out of the cottage and straight to the nearest constable without being asked. He had his phone out. He had the Interact transfer record on screen. $1,500 paid to my son-in-law's personal account 2 weeks earlier. "He told us it was an exclusive Muskoka retreat," the man said. "He said he had full use of the property. He charged all of us to come." That was 11 people at $1,500 each. That was $16,500 my son-in-law had collected for access to a property he did not own. That was fraud. The man with the tan was not alone. 3 others stepped forward in the next 90 seconds, each of them with receipts, each of them making very clear that they were clients who had been deceived, not friends who had made a choice. I watched my son-in-law's face as each one spoke. I had seen that expression before, in interview rooms and depositions spanning 3 decades. It is the face of a man realizing that the people he thought would protect him have decided to protect themselves instead. They put the handcuffs on him by the boathouse ramp. He was not quiet about it. He was very loud, in fact, for the first 30 seconds, and then the constable said something to him, quietly, and he stopped. I couldn't read her lips from the camera feed, but whatever she said, it worked. They walked him to the cruiser. He did not look back at the cottage, or at his associates, or at any of the people who had been his guests 12 minutes ago. I watched the unit pull out of my lane. I watched the others collect their bags and their coolers, and begin the complicated process of apologizing to the constables and negotiating who needed to give a formal statement. I watched Ridgecroft empty out, one rented SUV at a time, until only the lake remained, going flat and silver in the late afternoon light. I closed the laptop. Then I called Quentin. "It's done," I said. "Almost," he said. "The charges are laid. The debt already handled," I said. It was. Quentin had spent the previous morning contacting my son-in-law's 2 private lenders, both of whom were extremely interested in selling off a non-performing note to a corporate buyer. I had purchased both through 2289441 Ontario Inc. at 70 cents on the dollar. I had also been in contact with the bank holding my son-in-law's personal line of credit, which had been flagged for review following the criminal charge. Banks do not extend patience to people facing fraud allegations. I bought that note as well. My son-in-law owed money to a lot of people. He owed all of it to me now. I went to the detachment that evening to deliver 2 documents. The first was an invoice from 11473329 Ontario Inc. for the commercial use of Ridgecroft, 4 nights at $9,000 per night, plus the guest penalty for 11 unregistered persons at $3,000 each per night, plus the cleaning and restoration assessment, plus the documented damage total, $187,400 due within 30 days. The second document I handed to my son-in-law directly, across a counter under fluorescent light in the holding area. He looked terrible, 6 hours in a cell, and it showed in every part of him. He reached for the envelope the way a man reaches for something he already knows is going to hurt. Inside was the petition for divorce, filed that morning by my daughter's counsel, and behind it a single page on corporate letterhead, 2289441 Ontario Inc., explaining in plain language that I now held primary creditor status on approximately $94,000 of his personal debt, and that I intended to exercise full rights of collection. He looked up at me. His voice, for the first time since I had known him, had no performance in it at all. "Where is she?" he asked. "She is somewhere you cannot reach her," I said, "and she would like to keep it that way." He looked back at the papers in his hands. "I thought you were a soft old man," he said. "It wasn't an accusation, it was something closer to wonder." "I know," I said. "That's what you were supposed to think." I turned and walked out. Before I continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you've ever had to stand up to someone who confused your patience for weakness, hit the like button. It lets me know these stories are reaching the right people. The restoration crew finished at Ridgecroft 3 weeks into September. They replaced 2 dock boards, refinished the canoe, resealed the stone fire pit, and sourced a matching piece from the crystal pattern to replace the 3 broken glasses. The last one they could not match exactly. The pattern had been discontinued, and so I let that line of the damage log remain open as a small reminder of what carelessness costs when it meets someone who keeps receipts. My daughter stayed at the inn for 10 days and then at her sister's place in Barrie through the rest of the summer. By October, she had a short-term rental in Huntsville, close enough that she could drive up to Ridgecroft on weekends without it feeling like a burden. She was back on her regular nursing shifts. She had started eating breakfast again. Small things, the kind you only notice when they've been missing a long time. One morning in late September, I drove up to open the cottage for what I expected to be the last good weekend of the season. The maples on the point had gone red overnight, the way they do when the first cold snap comes through fast, and the lake was perfectly still. My daughter was already there when I arrived. She had let herself in with the key I'd given her the previous spring, the one from the weekend she'd helped me install the new dock cleats. Long before any of this, she was on the screened porch with a cup of tea, reading, with her feet tucked under her on the old wicker chair that had been there since before she was born. She looked up when I came through the door. She looked rested. She looked like herself. "There are loons out past the point," she said. 3 of them. I think it might be the same family from the summer. I went to the kitchen to make coffee. While the kettle boiled, I looked out the window at the water. The maples were throwing red light across the surface. An eagle was working the far shore, low and methodical, in no hurry at all. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number, a short text. I read it once, set the phone down, picked it up again, and blocked the number. My daughter called from the porch. Who was it? I poured my coffee. "Nobody," I said, "just a wrong number." I carried my cup out to the porch and sat down across from her. We watched the loons for a while without saying anything. The water was so still you could see their reflections perfectly. Each bird doubled beneath itself, pulling slowly apart as they moved toward the open bay. The lake was quiet, the cottage was clean, my daughter was safe. Some investments don't show up on a balance sheet, but a man who spent 32 years reading between the lines knows value when he sees it. This one was worth every cent.